Welcome to this Tuesday, October 31st edition of Just the Truth. Glad to have you join me today in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Talk. Welcome to this Tuesday, October 31st edition of Just the Truth. Glad to have you join me from the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios for Welcome to the Tuesday, October 31st edition of Just the Truth. Appreciate you joining me as I broadcast from the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Lots to cover today. Let's start with a quick update on the war in Israel. Shani Luke, a German-Israeli citizen who was kidnapped by the Hamas, and you probably saw her paraded in the back of a pickup truck in those early days of the war. She was seen in the back of a truck on footage from that October 7th attack. She was discovered dead and beheaded, according to Israeli government officials. Israeli government said in a post to social media X yesterday that it had been identified as Miss Luke. The notice said, "We're devastated to share the body of 23-year-old German-Israeli Shani Luke, who was found and identified," the post read. Shani, who was kidnapped from a music festival and tortured and paraded around Gaza from Hamas terrorists, experienced unfathomable horrors. Our hearts are broken. May her memory be a blessing. In an interview with a German newspaper Bild, Israeli President Herzog expanded on the discovery of Miss Luke's body, saying, "I'm truly sorry to report that we have now received news that Shani Nicole Luke has been confirmed murdered and dead. Her skull has been found." A translated version of his comments posted to the story read, "This means that these barbaric, sadistic animals simply chopped off her head as they attacked, tortured, and killed Israelis. It's a great tragedy, and I extend my deepest condolences to her family," the statement read. Luke was one of thousands who attended the Tribe of Nova music festival that we saw the horrible images and video that came out of Israel when that initial attack was recorded. The graphic footage of Miss Luke. She was unconscious, stripped down to her underwear in the back of a pickup truck, made its way around social media. In the video, the woman is seen face down. Her legs are bent abnormally. Though her face was unseen in the videos, her family recognized tattoos and dreadlocks and had identified with pretty much certainty that she was the one in the back of the truck. German Chancellor Scholz posted about Luke's death on social media yesterday, saying, "The news of Shani Luke's death is terrible," he said. "She was brutally murdered like many others. This represents all the barbarity of the Hamas attack, which must be punished. This is terrorism, and Israel has a right to defend itself." Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu flatly rejected calls for a ceasefire in comments to press yesterday. Now, once again, we're hearing some of these crazy progressive groups thinking that Israel should cease fire, that Israel should stop fighting, that Israel should not defend itself. Netanyahu compared October 7th, this massacre from Hamas, to Pearl Harbor and 9/11 attacks on U.S., saying that Israel is equally justified in retaliating against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. He went on to say that Israel will continue its war against Hamas until victory, he said. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen, Netanyahu said. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war, a war for our common future, he continued. Today we draw a line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. It's a time for everyone to decide where they stand. Israel will stand against the forces of barbarism until victory, he said. I hope and pray that civilized nations everywhere will fight back, and that should be our prayer as well. Israeli forces entered the second stage of their conflict with Hamas this week. They have greatly expanded their ground operations in the Gaza Strip. According to reports, military officials have warned that the war will be long and difficult. Supposedly, Joe Biden called the New York Times to the carpet. You may recall the headlines from the New York Times when the hospital in Gaza exploded during a White House meeting. We're told Joe Biden reportedly blasted the New York Times and their controversial coverage of this explosion near a Gaza Strip hospital. A report from Semaphore alleged that Biden met with Wall Street executives in the White House's Roosevelt Room last week to discuss how the paper had covered this story. He was particularly disturbed at such a headline, he said, that it appeared in an American newspaper. The original New York Times headline on October 17th read, Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians say. Palestinians. I mean, the New York Times is taking the word of Palestinians above those of Israel. According to Semaphore, Biden thought that the headline was irresponsible and could have triggered military escalation in the Middle East. Within the same day of the headline's publication and others like it blaming Israel for the blast, prominent Arab leaders canceled their meeting with Joe Biden. You may recall that this was when he was traveling to Israel. The Times received intense backlash from others, not just Joe Biden, on its coverage on the explosion. The story claimed through information released by Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry that Israeli airstrikes had caused the explosion of this Gaza hospital, claiming that it had killed 500 or more people at the time. Israel denied the claims and presented evidence that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was actually the ones behind the blast. U.S. intelligence has confirmed that Israel was not behind the explosion. The Times soon released a lengthy editor's note apologizing for its reliance on unverified claims by Hamas. You think? You think that the New York Times indeed owed an apology for depending on these as they said unverified claims by Hamas? The Times editor wrote this. The Times' initial accounts attributed the claim of Israeli responsibility to Palestinian officials and noted that the Israeli military said it was investigating the blast. However, they wrote, the early versions of the coverage and the prominence it received in the headline, news alert, and social media channels relied too heavily on claims by Hamas and did not make clear that those claims could not immediately be verified. The report left readers with an incorrect impression about what was known and how credible the account was. Well, thank you for finally telling us that. Semaphore also reported that a person familiar with the situation said that the Times staff has put pressure on writers to not rely on Gaza Health Ministry's numbers for stories. However, the article stated that independent journalists said that the health ministry's numbers have been largely consistent with other reports despite its ties to Hamas. The piece suggested that Biden's Wall Street meeting was primarily an effort to manage a key domestic political constituency that's pulling funding from universities over the response to Hamas terrorist attacks. Several other news organizations, such as the BBC and Reuters, were also criticized for relying on the Gaza Health Ministry for their initial reports on the hospital explosion. One final thought before we move on from our discussion on Israel today. Harvard President Claudine Gay announced the creation of an advisory council to combat anti-Semitism on campus after weeks of intense criticism over the university's response to the Israel-Hamas war. Gay delivered remarks at the Harvard Hillel Shabbat dinner saying that, quote, We are witnessing a surge in anti-Jewish incidents, rhetoric across the nation. And on our campus here, she said she had heard story after story of Jewish students feeling increasingly uneasy or even threatened. She wrote, as president, I am committed to tackling this pernicious hatred with the urgency it demands. Anti-Semitism has a very long and shameful history at Harvard. For years, this university has done too little to confront its continuing presence. No longer, she said. Gay said that a group of advisors, including faculty, staff, alumni, religious leaders from the Jewish community, will begin the vital work of eradicating anti-Semitism from our community. Harvard has faced severe criticism, you'll probably recall, when 34 student organizations signed a statement issued by Harvard Palestine solidarity groups that began by blaming the Israeli regime for all unfolding and violence in the hours after the attack. Gay initially released a brief message days after the attack. She seemed to be uh, wanting to protect the students' free speech, but she did not explicitly denounce the student group's controversial opinion. Following further criticism, Gay released a video message a couple of days later saying that though the university does not punish or sanction people for expressing polarizing views, it does not mean that it endorses them. Uh, that what really got her attention and the attention of the student groups was in the days following the university's response, a top law firm pulled job offers from students who were part of these student organizations. Some very prominent donors ended their relationships with the school. Former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, you may recall, withdrew his offer to participate in Harvard's fellowship. When you get the students' attention, when you let them know that you will not hire them, when you let them know that they're on the no hire list, that's how you get their attention. Your comments are welcome on the Truth text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. You can also leave a voice message, and your emails are welcome at joey@joeyhudson.com. I'm so appreciative of those of you who are joining me on this new journey. It's going to be fun. We're going to just drill down on the issues. We don't have any limitations on time. It's just you and me talking, educating you on the issues. Together, we'll cut through the noise and the madness that our country seems to be consuming the world right now. Be sure and let your friends know about the podcast as well. They can go to my website, joeyhudson.com, or wherever they listen to their podcast. Just search for Joey Hudson, Just the Truth, and join us on this journey together. Thanks for all the kind notes on social media. Debbie wrote on Facebook, this was in response to a video I posted yesterday. You need to see it. Find me on Facebook. Just search for Joey Hudson on Facebook and check out the video that I posted yesterday. It was my first day of retirement. You need to see it. If you haven't seen it yet, again, just search for Joey Hudson on Facebook. Debbie wrote on Facebook, too funny, and it made me laugh. After my horrible morning drive in without you telling me what was going on in the world and me lost as to where to listen to talk radio, by 10 a.m., I stopped my world and found Mike Live. You are missed on day one. Well, thank you, Deb. I missed you guys too, but again, we're connecting here on Just the Truth. Dolores wrote on Facebook, I missed you so much this morning on my drive to work. Gonna miss you again tomorrow. Christy says, I still got up at my regular time at 6:06. I listened to the podcast. Well, thank you, Christy. Then I hit Mike Gallagher's podcast, but it's just not the same. Well, we're still, no, it's not exactly the same, but Christy, we're gonna make it work. Teresa says, I missed your voice on my morning commute. I do not like the silence at all. Well, there doesn't need to be silence, Teresa. Just download Just the Truth and play it in your car on the way to work. Brian wrote, sure did miss you on the radio this morning. Thank you, Brian. And then Gary said, I sure did miss you this morning and on the way to work. Please come back. Well, Gary, again, I appreciate you subscribing to Just the Truth. Aaron wrote, I was not okay this morning either. I had no idea what to listen to on the way to school this morning. Listen to my podcast, Aaron. It's just that simple. Just listen to the podcast. And it was great to hear from Ken from North Carolina.
Well, Joy, I'll go ahead and wish you well. I had a short, funny story that Billy Graham told at one of his crusades, and maybe I'll get to share that with you personally someday. Taking phone calls from listeners and letting other people hear and other people's opinions is how talk radio got started in the 90s, Joey. So hopefully you and the station will line up, but in the meantime, I'll find a way to listen in. You've been awful kind with your time and understanding with differing opinions like mine. So God bless you. Wish you the very best. And if I don't get to call in for a few seconds this morning, then again, we'll catch up. I'll come to South Carolina, sit down and eat breakfast with you and tell you about that 4.5 pound brim that I caught up here in Lake James in western North Carolina that I caught on a 2 pound cricket. But anyway, bud, enjoyed the show. We'll see you again, and hopefully we'll listen in as much as we can. Good day.
I hope you will, Ken. I hope you'll join us on Just the Truth. Your message is welcome as well. 864-477-JOEY. 864-477-5639. Hey, if you need some prescriptions filled, you might want to run to the drugstore, to the pharmacy, because there may be a widespread walkout at some of the major pharmacies. I'll tell you all about that in just a minute. First, let me talk with you about PhD weight loss and nutrition. Over 3 years ago now, I'm so blessed that I met Dr. Ashley Lucas and her great team at the Greenville office. They talked with me about nutrition because that's what I love about the PhD weight loss and nutrition program. It's based on the science of nutrition. They talk with you about what to eat, when to eat, and how to eat. And that can be very important. If you'd like to lose 10, 20, 30 pounds or more, more importantly, if you want to get healthy, let me encourage you to call and set up your appointment today. 864-252-4925. You can also go online at myphdweightloss.com. Don't put this off. If you go ahead and start now, by Thanksgiving, you could have lost 10 pounds or so. By Christmas, maybe 20 or 30, and fit in some of those clothes that you haven't fit in quite some time. But more importantly, you'll feel better. You'll be able to focus. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll be able to do things that maybe you haven't been able to do in a long, long time. PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition, the official partner of the Clemson Tigers. So better get your prescriptions filled. Workers from some of the nation's largest pharmacy chains like CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, they planned another walkout potentially as they continue to plead for better working conditions. They're calling it Pharmageddon. Shane Jerominski is a licensed pharmacist. He has been for over a decade. He's helping to coordinate this walkout. He said in a statement that that the workers were just asking for better conditions and not such stressful work conditions as well. Some were expected to walk out yesterday and potentially through tomorrow on Wednesday. Workers at Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid have pledged to call in sick, according to Jerominski. A similar protest occurred earlier this year. You may recall there were about 25 Walgreens stores that had employees calling in sick. In September, CVS employees in at least a dozen stores didn't show up for work in a separate walkout. Jerominski says that workers are demanding a number of things to ease the onslaught of duties that they've taken on in recent years. Some of the biggest demands include guaranteed hours and better pay for pharmacy technicians. They also want pharmacists and pharmacy managers to have a direct say in their scheduling. The hope is that these changes will lead to better staff stores, improve work-life balance, and reduce the margin of error that could impact your safety, the patient's safety. A letter sent to Walgreens staff from organizers of this Pharmageddon said, "We are a force to be reckoned with, and we demand more from those who would see us than those who care for to suffer." It's hard to pinpoint how many people could potentially be involved in this effort. According to Jereminski, there could be 2,000 or more people over the next day or so who will call in sick. An additional 1,442 people said that they would, as long as hundreds to thousands of pharmacists and technicians participate, according to a screenshot that has been circulated on social media. Aside from asking people to call out sick, Jereminski also is trying to organize protests in front of CVS and Walgreens headquarters in the week to come. Jereminski doesn't consider himself the main organizer, he said. He said that he believes he's in a good position to help others. He has a huge social media following, has over 122,000 followers on Facebook, most of whom he says are pharmacists, technicians, and other healthcare workers. He says that he gets direct messages constantly about working conditions. The issue is that major pharmacy chains have been unable to effectively staff their stores. At the same time, they've ramped up vaccine appointments, which made pharmacies fall behind on filling prescriptions, according to many pharmacists across the country. Uh, a pharmacist released a statement to Fox Business this past weekend saying our stores are still thousands of prescriptions behind. Our patients are still going days, weeks, or even months without their needed medicine, and they're pretending that there's not a problem. Until they acknowledge that there's an actual problem and work to address the actual problem, we have to keep pushing, he wrote. Jereminski said that he heard about this problem from other workers from other pharmacies as well. He also reviewed internal documents from some CVS stores indicating that they have a week's worth of backlog. He says that's only part of the problem. He said every time the pharmacist steps away from filling their checking prescriptions, you introduce the chance for error. Now, I don't know that I'd really ever thought about that, but think about it. Your pharmacist is filling your prescription. He or she has to go over to the drive-through window or to the indoor counter, takes he or she away from filling that prescription. I can see where that could lead to potential mistakes. Um, A spokesperson for CVS says that it's not seeing any unusual activity regarding unplanned pharmacy closures or pharmacist walkouts, and that it's working with its pharmacists to directly address any of their concerns. Walgreens says it took a number of steps in our pharmacies to ensure that our teams can concentrate on providing optimal patient care. This includes enhancing technology and centralizing many of its operations. So, again, you may want to get that prescription filled in case the pharmacy in your area is affected. You know, we've all thought about this. It's been a talking point against the influx of illegals since Joe Biden moved into the White House and opened the southern border. And that's these illegals who are coming in through our southern border being able to vote. Uh, how many times have you been at a dinner party or you've been out speaking with someone and that topic has come up that the Democrats want the illegals to come in so that they become Democrat voters? In a Fox News column written by Betsy McCaughthy, uh, says if you think offering migrants luxury hotel rooms, free meals, laundry service, transportation, health care, and immigration lawyers is excessive, just wait until they can vote, she wrote. Democrats are pushing to allow non-citizens to vote in local elections in New York, in Boston, and other municipalities, as well as statewide in Connecticut and other states. The number of migrants pouring across the southern border hit a record high. This, according to data released this past weekend. Illegal immigrant crossings soared 21% over the previous month. On a yearly basis, the figure has hit almost 2.5 million people, 2.48 million specifically. According to McCauley, quote, Democrats may pretend to be shocked and distressed. Don't be fooled. Dems see these newcomers as their guarantee of a permanent voting majority in local elections, not years from now after the newcomers become citizens, but right now, she writes. New York Mayor Eric Adams' rhetoric is typical, she says. He warns that the overwhelming number of migrants arriving, currently 16 to 17,000 a month, will destroy New York City. But he's also leading the legal effort to turn migrants into voters, she says. Adams and other New York Democrats pushed President Joe Biden to expedite work authorizations just for them. They said it's about making migrants self-sufficient, maybe, but Dems have another powerful motive. Ms. McCaughthy says, if you read the fine print of New York City's Our City, Our Vote, it was enacted back in December of 2021. It says that anyone with a work authorization who has been in the city for a mere 30 days can qualify to vote in local elections, even if they entered the country illegally. Now, let that sink in for a minute. You've got illegals coming into our country. We're giving them a free flight or a free bus ride to the city of their choice. We put them up, we house them, we feed them, give them clothing, health care. And the Democrats also want to give them a voter registration card. McCaughthy continued to write, Biden's recent action fast-tracking work authorizations for Venezuelan border crossers who make up about 41% of the recent arrivals in New York City will make tens of thousands of them eligible to vote under New York City's new law as soon as they obtain their working papers. That is, if New York City's voting law is allowed to go into effect. She writes that's a big if because the law is presently tied up in court. A group of Republicans, which are being led by Staten Island Borough President Vito Fossella, has sued, arguing that the state's constitution grants the right to vote to every citizen. A Staten Island judge bought that argument and struck down the law, but Adams' law department is appealing that ruling in a higher court, arguing that the state constitution does not specifically prohibit non-citizens from voting. Adams has a shot at winning, she says. Vermont's top court ruled in favor of allowing non-citizens to vote in municipal elections, even though the Vermont Constitution restricts voting in state elections. California and Maryland also permit municipalities to enfranchise non-citizens, she writes. She goes on to talk about the Boston City Council is debating allowing newcomers to vote, including migrants who recently came across the border illegally and have temporary protected status. Washington, D.C. Democrats rammed through a local law in November of 2022, allowing non-citizens and even foreign embassy employees. You heard me. Foreign embassy employees are allowed to vote as long as they've resided in Washington, D.C. for 30 days. In Connecticut, Democrats want to amend the state's constitution to allow non-citizens to vote in state and local elections. Amending the state's charter is a multi-year complicated process, and it's facing some opposition from the Republican minority in the legislature. House Minority Leader Representative Vincent Candelora calls non-citizen voting outrageous. For New York City, Ms. McCaughthy writes, it's suicidal. That would be a more accurate description. Adding that some 800,000 non-citizens to the 5 million registered voters in the city will have an impact, even if newcomers don't always vote as a block. Nora Moran of the United Neighborhood Houses, a New York nonprofit, predicts non-citizen voting will make political leaders more responsive to the needs of newcomers and their neighborhoods. Adams cautioned, Mayor Adams, that is, cautioned 2 months ago, to the extent more responsive means spending more, that will be a disaster. City spending on migrants already exceeds the budgets of the fire, sanitation, and parks departments combined. We are past our breaking point, he said. But again, he likes the idea that they could possibly vote. That's just the crazy world that we live in. That cities will allow non-citizens to vote in their election, and make no mistake, folks, states are going to follow. States are going to try to follow. Why else would Joe Biden turn his head and look the other way while 2.5 million sneak into our country? Happy Halloween to you. Are you going trick-or-treating tonight? As we wrap up today's edition of Just the Truth. We think about Halloween. We think about our childhood days, and when you remember how excited you were on Halloween. It's changed a lot, hasn't it? There's always this debate of how old is too old for kids to go trick or treating. It's generally agreed that nobody should be still asking door to door for candy when they hit their 20s. I think we agree to that. Newser.com, though, says that there's no consensus on the cutoff point for teenagers. They write some towns still ban older teenagers from trick or treating, including Belleville, Illinois, where a city law states that it's unlawful for any person to appear on the streets, highways, public homes, private homes, or public places in the city to make trick or treat visitations unless they are in the 8th grade or below. Now, some cities put an age on that 12, 13, 14. Some have curfews. Uh, Belleville puts a time limit at 8:30. You can't be out after 8:30. In Chesapeake, Virginia, they have an age limit on trick-or-treaters, a law dating back from the 1970s used to threaten trick-or-treaters over 12 with 6 months jail time. Can you imagine that? You got a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old out trick-or-treating, and they're arrested and they're put in jail. In 2019, Newser says, after the law was mocked by late night hosts, the city raised the age limit to 14. So now, if you're 15 or 16, you could spend the night in jail. Well, actually, they did take the jail time out of that. In Portsmouth, Virginia, the age limit is still 12. Police say that an age limit helps stop teenagers from causing disturbances and taking all the candy, I guess. Karen Sanford is a mother of 4 teens in Seattle. She says she doesn't have a problem with teens growing up in a very uncertain world, trying to recapture some of the magic of childhood. And there was a magic to that, wasn't there? Remember how you just almost make yourself sick uh, eating so much candy and having that sugar high? She said, when I see teenagers on my porch, I see big, awkward babies who act tough, yet still need the love of a mom and dad. Opening my door and smiling is an easy chance to do this, she told the Washington Post. I hope I never get so jaded that I forget to do this. Her 17-year-old son, Brady, says if we're not old enough to vote or drink, then we are still young enough to trick or treat. One other note, Beverly Hills forbids young people from possessing shaving cream on Halloween as well. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. It was a great to be part of your day today in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, be sure and visit myphdweightloss.com. Set up your consultation today. If you haven't joined our mailing list yet, be sure and visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Just click on the button, connect with Joey, and enter to stay connected through email. And again, I hope you'll encourage your friends and neighbors to join our little community here on Just the Truth. Thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Until next time, remember, folks, God's got this. He's still in control.